Okay, good afternoon. This is the September 6th edition of Council Connections. My name is David Smith. You may know or be familiar with our guest today, Michelle Gramoglia. And today we're going to give her a chance to tell us how she became Michelle Gramoglia. She didn't just land down from heaven from a spaceship or something in her appointed and anointed chair there. I had a great conversation with her about 2 days ago, and she has got a very interesting background to tell you how she became who she is. So I'm going to let her do most of the talking. I may nudge her here or there at some point along the way, but you're going to want to hear her talk. So, Michelle?
Thanks, Dave. I appreciate it. So to start with, I did not start out as Michelle Gramoglia. That may surprise you. I started out as Michelle Voigtlander, German name, also with some silent G's. I was born on September 25th, 1978.
There's a fact you didn't know.
Gen X, very proud of that. So I am 45 years old. I will be 46 this year. I was born in Benedictine Hospital in Kingston. My mother and father are both from Hurley, so I'm local. And my parents still live there. I have a younger sister and a younger brother. And I graduated Kingston High School in 1996. When I was a junior in high school, I took an accounting class, a basic accounting class, and I loved it. But I also was on the mock trial team, and I had a global studies teacher by the name of Emil Zullo, who some of you might know, Mr. Zullo, and he taught mock trial. And you guys know me, you know my personality. Some of you know that I like to debate from time to time. And I was a rock star on that mock trial team. And I for sure thought I was going to be a lawyer until I took that accounting class. And I loved it. And I did really well in it. And from that point on, I knew that I wanted to go to school to be an accountant. And I also knew my family, we had always vacationed in Cape Cod. We really did not have a lot of money, actually. My father was an IBMer. Well, actually, he worked for Costco, Kingston Oil Supply, 2 jobs. He worked third shift at Costco and started at IBM in the boiler room, but they taught him programming language and then was able to work his way up at IBM. But he worked 2 jobs until I was a junior in high school. So we didn't have a lot of resources growing up, but we would take a short trip to Cape Cod, like a weekend trip every summer. And I just always loved Massachusetts and the Cape. So I really wanted to go to school in Massachusetts. So we started looking at colleges out in Massachusetts. So we spent, the weekend scheduling all the school trips. So the first college we went to visit was BC, Boston College. Okay. So we go to BC. I didn't like it at all. I thought it was too stuffy, but my dad bought a windbreaker from BC and he hung it on the back of his door in IBM. And it always hung there until he retired. I think he wanted people to think that he had a kid that went to BC. It really didn't matter. But at any rate, I really loved the program at Northeastern. And for those of you that are familiar with it, they had a business program where you would go for, I think it was 5 years, but you would, or maybe it was 4 years, but it was a co-op program where you would alternate academics and different jobs every semester. And then you'd come out essentially with a job and a degree. I didn't like their campus at all when I visited it. So that was a huge disappointment. So that weekend was a bust. But on a whim, one weekend, my mother and I went up to UMass in Amherst. And then that was all she wrote. I loved it. That was an old agricultural school, 125 years old or so by the time I went. But they had an excellent school management. I loved Amherst. I spent my summers there, worked in the accounting department. This is probably a dirty little secret. I did 4.0s in my accounting classes and 2.8s in my gen eds. but I was fortunate enough, they had an excellent placement program. And by the time I graduated, I had job offers actually from all of the big 5 accounting firms at the time. And I had to make a choice, and I selected PricewaterhouseCoopers. I was debating between Arthur Andersen at the time and PricewaterhouseCoopers. I really didn't want to go with PwC. And the reason was because it was not sexy. It was sort of like the sure thing. Everybody could get a job at PwC, you know. In retrospect, because I was going to work in Boston with all of my accounting girlfriends, we got an apartment. The year after I started in Boston, living with girlfriends that worked at all the different accounting firms, the year after was when Enron happened. And I had girlfriends that worked at Andersen, and it imploded. So it turned out PwC was a good choice.
Yes.
Yes.
This is something we touched on the other day. So it's one of my check marks.
Mhm.
So here's Michelle at a young age, single at the time, I presume, living with your buddies, having a good life. And along comes 9/11.
Yeah. So I worked at that time at PwC, I was, well, I didn't tell you this part. This will surprise everyone, but PwC had a best and the brightest program. Every year they would take 150 of their freshman class people from across the country and put them into the best and the brightest program. And I had been selected for it. Because of that, I got to rotate through for 2 years, different parts of the company. It wasn't just straight audit. And that particular part of the year, I was working in the office. I wasn't auditing, and I was in the financial district working in Boston. And on September 11th, you guys remember the day, it was a beautiful day. We're sitting in the office, I'm sitting in my cubicle, and all of a sudden it's like 9 o'clock in the morning, everybody starts going crazy. Turn on the news, look at your computer, my cell phone rings, my mom says, you know, you're never going to believe what's happening. And we don't believe what's happening. And so it's September 11th. And to make a very long story short, on 9/11, nobody really knew what was going to happen. We were in a big city. Boston ended up shutting down the T. And I didn't live in the financial district. At that time, I lived in South Boston. So for anyone that knows the layout of Boston at all, so the financial district is kind of right next to South Station. And then right sort of beyond that, there's a waterway, and then is Southie. And I lived in Southie at the time. Side note, I was the first generation of yuppies to live in Southie, and they did not like us at all. Because where we were taking apartments, we were also living next to like the salt of the earth families that had lived there for generations. But at any rate, because they had shut down the subways, our office evacuated. And nobody, you know, we were all just kind of walking. So as I was telling Dave, you know, I was 21, 22 years old at the time. I remember to this day what I was wearing. I had on black slacks and a long sleeve, like blue shirt like this, a button down. It was hot. And I had my laptop bag, and everybody was so upset. And of course nobody knew, we couldn't get in touch with one another because the cell phone circuits were overloaded. And my sister was at college in Binghamton, and I was trying to call her, make sure she was okay. And I'm walking, and it was hot, and I'm trying to get to my apartment. Couldn't get in touch with my roommates. Nobody really knew what was going on. And as I'm walking and sweating and upset, I'm getting catcalled by construction workers, which would happen at that time because I was 21 or 22 and cute and whatever. And I remember being so mad about getting catcalled in that moment. You know, it never, I mean, it would bother me otherwise, but like in that moment, I was so furious and upset about it because of course those people didn't know what was going on, because they were doing construction and, but it has always stuck with me in that moment. And I yelled at those people. I remember screaming, like, don't you know what's going on? Like that memory has always just stuck with me so much. But anyway, so part of what happened and why 9/11 is really extra meaningful. I mean, we all have important moments, but 5 of my colleagues from Boston were on those planes because the planes flew out of Logan. And they were flying out for work assignments. And one of them was a college, someone I went to college with. And she hated her job. She hated her job. And she didn't want to be on that plane. She hated being a PWC. And she was killed in the attack. So it was just, it was really a very poignant. And, so those years, even though I was only in Boston for 2 years, there are certain time periods of your life that are short but very meaningful. It wasn't just 9/11, but there were a lot of things that happened in that couple-year period of time that will always stick with me, and that was just something. Shortly after that time, I ended up meeting my husband through mutual friends. He was local to Saugerties, and I made the decision to leave Boston shortly thereafter. And I got an apartment in Saugerties, not living with him, but we started our relationship. And I definitely appreciate my time, but I'll never forget, having lived there during 9/11 and the things that happened, but those are definitely moments that, will stick with me for a long time.
Got emotional again.
Yeah.
Both of us.
Mm-hmm.
So you are now in Albany, commuting to Albany, and what kind of promotional or job opportunities present themselves to you there? How did you come in contact with the CCRC model, et cetera?
Yeah, so I continued to work for PwC for another 5 years out of the Albany office. I was living in Saugerties. My husband and I continued to develop our relationship and eventually, become engaged and purchase a home, eventually get married. Well, we weren't married while I was working at PwC, but at any rate, I had gotten to the point in my career where I was 7 years in at PwC, which usually it's people last 3 years and then they're out. It's just there's really good money to be made in public accounting, but it's a grind. And I eventually found it to be kind of meaningless and not really very fulfilling. I learned an enormous amount, but I had gotten to the point where sort of 2 things converged. I was up for manager, and they kind of sat me down and said, at this point, 40% of your compensation is going to be tied to selling new business if you go to manager, which was not appealing to me at all because PricewaterhouseCoopers in the Albany market was very outpriced and really had outsold sort of the middle-sized accounting firms. That was not appealing, especially as my husband and I were looking at starting our family, and I didn't want to tie my compensation to selling new business. That did not appeal to me. But at the same time, and this is something we talked about, and I said to Dave that I would be happy to talk about something that I thought was sort of either a missed opportunity or a failure in my life. And I know that a lot of times you guys think that maybe everything in my life is successful, and that's obviously not true. We don't all have just successes. So something that I think is something that I regret not having done successfully is I actually am not a CPA. I know a lot of people think that because I was in public accounting for as long as I was, I never actually successfully completed my CPA. I stopped without completing all of the sections of it. So I was able to have a 7-year career in public accounting, but I'm not actually a CPA.
But you passed many of the sections.
Yes. I didn't need it to do as far as I went. So I took all of the sections that I took successfully, but I stopped before taking the last. I would have needed to have my CPA in order to be a manager. So, I have obviously significant public accounting experience, and I have, my accounting degree, and it's never stopped me from being the roles that I've had, but you know, really you become a CPA to be able to do taxes and other things. And I thought that's what I wanted to do, but that's wasn't what I needed to do. But at any rate, so I decided I wanted to get out of public accounting, and I started seeking jobs in other fields. While I was in public accounting, though, I had a CCRC client, believe it or not, in the Berkshires, and I applied for a controller position at Kingston Hospital, and Kingston Hospital is who built Woodland Pond. And its CFO at the time, Dave Scarpino, liked that I had this client on my resume, and he hired me. And then the rest was history.
Well, there's more to the history. You got hired.
Yes.
And then how did you actually come to physically
Be at Woodland
be
Pond?
here? Yeah.
Okay. So when I got hired at Kingston Hospital in 2007, I was physically working for Kingston Hospital at their Grant Avenue business office location. In 2007, Kingston Hospital was in the process of trying to figure out how to merge corporately with Benedictine Hospital. Some of you are aware that around that time, New York State looked at hospital systems and said, basically, a lot of you are operating in the red. And we have too many beds. And if you're in the same community, you've got to figure out how to merge. And Kingston and Benny fell into that situation. So I was assigned by this CFO at that time to oversee the allocation of millions of dollars of grant money to apply to construction projects to basically merge Kingston and Benedictine duplicate services. So like both had maternity departments, both had whatever, emergency, whatever. So I wasn't actually like hammering nails, but the allocation of the grant money, I had to help figure out how was it getting paid to the construction firms and then submit it to the state. While I was doing that, at the same time, that CFO, whose name is Dave Scarpino, started to be concerned that the stories that we were being told by the developer about Woodland Pond, which Kingston Hospital was building, were not maybe, totally current. Like maybe the numbers were a little stale. So he wanted me to start looking at them. And so I started looking at the numbers. And
from here or from remote?
From remote initially, and then I started coming down full time. In February of 2009, I started coming down here full time and working with the developer, with the team on site. And then once that happened in February of 2009, then I was down here. And then that way we can make sure everything that we had at then Health Alliance, which was the merged organization, was completely current with the developer's numbers. So then sort of the rest was history.
Well, told me that what period of time elapsed between the time you got here and the time you found out that you weren't getting current information?
About 2 weeks.
2 weeks. So she turned, the light turned on in 2 weeks. And then what?
And then so then really I sort of immersed myself into a much more heavily construction oversight role, working with the developer, working with the owner's reps. And then we had to all collectively bring the project over the finish line, including, things like.
Do you have anything with you that might be an example of that, Michelle?
Oh, are you an attorney leading the witness?
Finger in the
yes.
file for
file. Myself, Frank Mandy, which is Joan's son, lots of people. We were at that point, the architect and engineer who were out of Long Island, they kind of threw their hands and said, we're not coming back. So those of us were the boots on the ground, me being pregnant with Michael, which is my 14-year-old son. We were walking your apartments and cottages every day looking for things like chips in the showers and everything to make sure that you could get done. Those are called punch list items. I've got my folders. I'm sure Frank probably threw his away, but I kept mine. With all my notes, we would go around and around and around because somebody had to do it and then tell the construction team, you got to go back to, let's see, 439, because they're missing, replace the bedroom something, because I can't even read my handwriting. But, somebody had to do it, and it was, we had to roll our sleeves up. So, the stories about Michelle knows where the bodies are buried. It's true.
Because she buried him.
Mhm. But it is also a true story that, there is a big rumor mill here. The stories about how my son, because I walked so much when I was in the late stages of my pregnancy, after he was born, he did not like to be put down. Because I walked so much, at the end there. And eventually I had to put the high heels away, but that was really at the end, because he was born November 23rd, and these punch lists go right up till like the middle of November.
Excuse me, I know that the certificate of occupancy for my cottage was dated September 4th of 2000 on the inside of the electrical panel. If your son was born in September, this is like 2.5 months before. I can just get a picture of you moving around doing.
Yeah, I mean,
getting
the cottages actually, I didn't punch list the cottages. The cottages were done before the building. And
Oh.
different wings were done at different times. So this particular packet here, this is North Wing. North Wing was the last to come online. This was definitely October. So, we were kind of rolling as it went. And then Health Center was almost a year later.
So then Woodland Pond becomes Woodland Pond. There's a
Mhm.
separation and an opportunity for you.
Yeah. Just, I don't know if you all know this or not, but September 25th, which is the first day people moved in here, is my birthday. I think a lot of you know that, right?
Yeah.
I know, it's kind of
This
crazy.
is really your baby then.
It is my baby.
My big baby.
I know, my big baby.
So Michelle, how much supervisory or managerial experience did you have before you were offered the job here?
0.
0. You said that on your application for the job. I have 0.
Yes.
And
I
you
said,
can-
why don't you hire someone that has never managed people in her
Yeah,
whole life?
things are going
And is
so good.
also only 32 years old
And
and has never been to another CCRC.
there's much more to it than that, but they offered you the job.
I was-
a board. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was one of 6 applicants. So at the time that I was from September of 2009 until 2012, 2013, when the executive director position, which was the precursor to my position, opened up. I was the controller here, so in charge of finances. At the time, this position was called the executive director because it's still reported up through Health Alliance. My name? It was multiple people, and they were all men. Well, first, the original one was Cynthia Rosenberg, but she only lasted 6 months till we booted the management company. And then it was all a series of men. And then in 2012 or 2013, the position vacated for the last time, and I was one of 6 applicants. I think they had a couple from Health Alliance and then a few from the outside. And the board, which we did have a full board the entire time. It's just they have passive powers because Health Alliance was still involved until 2016. They selected me. And yes, they did know that I had never been a manager. They knew that I'd never been to another CCRC, and they knew that I was 32. They must have seen something in me. I don't know what it was.
No.
But it really is, and then eventually in March of 2016, when we separated from Health Alliance, the title changed from executive director to president and CEO, but nothing about the role changed. It was just, because we had no parent company anymore. It just was that the title changed. But enough about work.
We want to talk about. Oh, I have more questions.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
What would you like to talk about?
I wanted to talk about your list of questions.
Well, not work then.
Yeah.
Okay. So you referenced something about your style of management and where you got some bits and pieces from it and some good sage advice. Can you share that with the crowd here?
I would love to, even though it's a bittersweet story.
No.
Oh.
You said
Oh.
you.
Yes. Oh, the good part. I'm sorry, I forgot our pre conversation. When I was a child and I started in this job at age 32, remember when I said at the beginning of this, and I thought for sure I was going to be a lawyer because I'm kind of headstrong and opinionated and stuff? Well, that carried over into when I became the executive director at a young age 32. And many of the people in this room and your neighbors let me know it a lot and molded me into the much more mature and thoughtful person that I am now. In other words, the residents have molded me into the more thoughtful, patient, contemplative CEO that I am now.
Anybody else want to throw an adjective in there?
Give yourselves a round of applause.
But I was impressed. I was impressed with that when she shared that with me yesterday, that residents have come to her privately and not in a criticized way, but hey, you might try this or this might work. And look at what we've gotten from her taking the best of that advice.
I mean, it really is true, though. I mean, all joking aside, I really have been so appreciative of all of the very sage and just all of the advice the residents have been very generous to give to me over the years. You have not been shy to do it, and it's all been done in a very respectful manner. And I know it's been done in a way that has been intended to help me grow as a professional and not in a way that's been critical. And I know that that's been done in an effort to make Woodland Pond the best place that it can be. And I see that as a way that when the water rises, we all rise. And you all have brought so much wisdom, all of your years of experience. You've seen me where I've been, making a very impetuous decision or acting immature, childish, whatever you name it, being headstrong, more so when I was much younger, much younger. But really, I mean, so much of my professional development has come from the residents' advice, and I do truly appreciate that.
Thank you. And then you had an opportunity to show all your leadership qualities during COVID and the pandemic. Is there any special thing that occurred then? And I don't know the answer. I'm not leading you in a certain direction, but that knocked us all back on our feet. Most of us a good number of us in the room were here at the time, and you just grabbed that whole idea and made it yours, even though the rules changed from not moment to moment, but certainly week to week. And I always felt that the ship was in good hands. I don't know how you felt or how you slept at night, but we slept well. Our needs were met. Our meals were delivered. Our mail was delivered. Everything got done around here. I know you guys behind your closed doors must have been, I'm not sure what you must have been doing. I never had anything like that happen to me.
There was a lot of it that I felt okay about. I didn't feel good about any of it. Any of it.
Well, everything we did during the pandemic.
I felt okay about a lot of it because I knew we had to do a lot of it. What I felt the worst about and just really did, I did sleep, but what would have kept me up was the situations where we had a spouse in independent living and a spouse in the health center. And when the state regs would not allow the two to cross. And I prayed every day that we were not going to have a situation where one passed, and we didn't, thank God. But that is the one thing that just truly ate away at me more than anything. And there were a few couples. And if you think hard, if you can remember who was here at the time, and I don't want to name names, but if you think about some people, one in particular that always did a particularly meaningful thing at our veterans program. He was in independent living. His wife was in skilled at the time. He would come in my office and just cry and beg me to go into skilled to see his wife. And it just eats me up. And I would pray that she would not pass because the regulations were so strict. And, we all had this fear instilled in us that this was this, almost like an Ebola situation, and I didn't want to make the wrong decision to expose everyone else. We were trying to work with the best information that we had at hand, but that was by far the thing that ate me up more than anything. And we never talked about that very much. I didn't talk about that publicly on my addresses or in the memos, but that was always the undercurrent, in my heart, of just being so fearful that a spouse would pass away without their spouse having been able to say goodbye.
Well, let's shift gears a little. How do you have a dominant role here, and you also run a household, and you have, I know, some other, how do you balance all that? Where do you get your energy from to be good at all of it?
I don't know that I'm good at all of it.
Well, you're good here, that's for sure. But
I was asked that same question this weekend. I think that a lot of you know that I'm on the Mohawk board.
Yeah.
I'm also on the board of directors at our ambulance company in Saugerties. I've got, as you all know, I think the most important by far thing in my life is my family. And for the last several months, that I've been gone every day by 3:30 because my kids both play multiple sports, travel sports. I have a 14-year-old son named Michael, who plays baseball right now, and multiple other sports. I've got a daughter that's 17 named Anna, who's a junior in high school. My husband is a coach. So we have a lot going on all the time. I do try to balance everything as best that I can. And I'm trying to be very mindful right now, especially with my kids, of being present. This year in January, a high school friend that I was very close to in high school and continued to be very close acquaintances with was one of 3 families that was devastated by a horrible car accident on 28, where 2 16-year-old boys lost their lives and one was injured. And those children are my children's age and they're contemporaries. And that has hit our community very hard. And that has just really tried to make me try to be as more present even than usual. So, I leave at 3:30 unapologetically when it's this time of year because, and I actually really appreciate the fact that the residents don't really seem to think that that's a problem.
why would we?
Well,
You don't punch a clock.
No, I
us.
don't.
Yeah.
I don't, but I do appreciate that. And I think residents have been really gracious about the fact that you understand that I get my job done regardless.
You've got a decent, very good team behind you as well.
Yeah. But I say the same thing to them because we only have our kids with us for a short time, and it feels like it goes even faster. I enforce that with them as well. I try to kick people out because I know they have things. And even if they don't have kids, people have their own passions. It's not just about kids. I think it's really important for people to have their own balance. And I think it makes them better at work when they do. But I do have a couple of things that I try to do. I wish that I focused more on a little bit more exercise because I feel better when I do it. And I haven't been making enough time for that. So I'm going to work on that. But I do have a garden, a vegetable garden, and I spend a lot of time in there when I can.
Okay. Now this is a good time to shift gears again and go to the question and answer period. And we have some people who couldn't be with us today who submitted some questions, and I have some audience members who are going to act as those persons.
Hi, Michelle. We understand from Anna that you have you enjoy camping with your family and your friends very much, and that you have a special relationship with one of the animals that you see on your way there.
Oh,
So can you tell us about that?
Yes. Yes. Oh dear. Yes, we do. So I'm a little quirky. You guys probably don't know that so much, but I'm a little silly. And every time I see a Bambi or a family member of Bambi on the side of the road, I obviously say, "Oh dear." And However many I see, I say, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. So if I see 5, I say 5 oh dears. I mean, obviously it's funny. I see Margaret laughing. No one else finds it funny, but I think it's hysterical. So feel free to use that. If you look out your window while you're driving, you can say, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. I'm glad she shared that with you.
Peter?
Michelle,
Yes.
we've all appreciated your professionalism. We all know you as Michelle, but we all have nicknames. And I'm wondering how you came up with a nickname KOA Karen.
Oh, well, because I am a KOA Karen. I wonder who would have shared that with you. Yes, we have spent the last 10 years RVing, and that has been something that has been very important to our family. We just sold our last RV last year because with travel baseball, we just don't have time to do it anymore. But we've had a great, we have like 8 different families that we've camped with, and we've done Disney and Nashville and South Carolina, lots of local trips and everything. But I am a very nervous Nancy, okay, extremely nervous. So last year, we had a seasonal site in Copake, New York. And up in Copake, there is a hiking trail called Bash Bish Falls, which a lot of people think is Bish Bash, but it's actually Bash Bish. Personally, I think it should be Bish Bash, but it's not. And it's in some places narrow, but probably not that narrow. It's probably like this narrow. Okay. And my girlfriend and I took our kids, who are all like at the time 13 and 16, and had appropriate footwear on this trail. And it was dry. It wasn't wet, but it's a little bit rocky. And every time they got close to the edge, I would say, move over, move over, move over, move over, because I only have one daughter and one son, and I don't want anything to happen to them. So on that trip, which was like 9 years into our camping life, so this probably should have started a long time ago. And because we weren't technically at a KOA, but KOA is Campgrounds of America, they started calling me KOA Karen. And now it's all the time KOA Karen. Now, they say it to me all the time, like, that's a bad thing. But last weekend, Anna wanted to go, my 17-year-old, wanted to go to a swimming hole with her friends. And of course, I had a philosophical problem with that, even though I did it as a 17-year-old. But I let her go. And I said, don't you dare go in that water. So I know, Joan, I know. But she didn't. And then she got home, and I could tell her boyfriend was like in a really bad mood. And I said, and I had said to him, Zach, you really shouldn't have gone in it actually wasn't a swimming hole. They were jumping off a bridge into the water. I said, Zach, that's really dangerous. You shouldn't have done that. And I could tell he was getting annoyed at me because they've been together like 3 years. He knows I'm a KOA Karen. He knew to expect it from me. So he went, they were going to go swimming in our pool. I said, Anna, why is Zach in such a bad mood? She said, because Mom, I was a KOA Karen the whole time we were there. I was yelling at all the kids to stop jumping, and I was getting so nervous. So now she's KOA Karen. Yeah.
That's good. That was much more than that she had shared. Now I have just one more person who put something forward for your consideration. I'm not quite sure how to describe this, whether you fell for your husband or he swept you off your feet at a CVS.
CVS.
Pharmacy.
Okay, so I'm sure this has happened to pretty much everyone in this room. Dave, my husband and I had just started dating. So it's 22 years ago. And I had on shoes very similar to what I have on now, which you guys can look at later, but they're wedge sandals. And we were standing in the front of a CVS, and I'm positive an earthquake or something must have happened, but we were just standing there talking to friends, 2 couples standing still talking to each other. And I was kind of like wiggling my foot, and I'm not exactly sure why. Must have been the earthquake. And there was no intoxicants involved. I would just like to say that for the record. Somehow I fell over on the ground. And this was the first time I had met these other 2 people, which were his close friends from high school. So in the front of the CVS, just by the cash register, I was standing like this, and then I was laying like this. The end. No, this was 22 years ago.
Okay. that's all the plants I have. So if anybody else has got a question, Yakov can circulate around.
Oh, I'm sure, yes. He was like, he then went down on his knee and proposed.
Just like.
Questions?
Audience.
I have, oh, okay.
You got something first?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I was lucky enough, to work for many years in medical institutions,
Yeah.
hospitals, and so on. And I'm really impressed by your openness as an administrator. Because I dealt with many administrators going from the very good ones to not so good ones, to put it mildly. And I think that that's something that really impressed me. And, first of all, it's not just a question of maturity, I think, and, it has nothing to do with age. It's, mental or, personality. And so, this is one of the things that, I was telling Leah, but one of the things that impressed us when we came here, that there was this team of 3 young women, basically running the place to a large extent, except the ones in maintenance, with the hammers. So I just wanted to say that, and I'm pretty impressed that, sometimes, you come with suggestions, ideas that you have preconceived and that you many times, I don't know, I wouldn't say always because I don't know, but many times you are open to change your mind, which is not very easily found among administrators.
Well, I appreciate that.
I know there was a period of time when we came from Health Alliance to nonprofit status. And where were you in all of that? Did you immediately just stay on being controller during the whole uproar and then come as CEO, or were you much more of a mover and shaker during that period of time?
So really right from when we opened in September of 2009, I was the controller here at Woodland Pond. It was a little bit interesting because I was actually working for the CFO of Kingston Hospital or Health Alliance. So he was the CFO and then he became the CEO. But he was there corporately, but I was physically working here for the executive director that was here. And we did not see eye to eye, but my boss was the CFO at Health Alliance. And so that was a little bit of a dicey situation because I did not like some of the things that I was seeing happening here, but I was physically assigned to be working here. And actually, believe it or not, there was a situation, there was a corporate compliance situation that I uncovered that had to do with insurance payments that happened at the hands of that executive director that ended up having him lose his job. Actually, maybe that's why they hired me. That's right. I forgot about that. Yeah, we discovered that there was an insurance situation that happened that then executive director was promulgating that I uncovered that made the position vacant. Maybe they liked that I sleuthed that out. Maybe that's why they ended up hiring me. But yeah, so I guess I was moving and shaking at that time, but I was shaking more than moving because I was a little bit nervous about my job. That was actually kind of a low point, to tell you the truth, in my career. We didn't talk about this. I was not welcome here at that time. I was sort of on the outs because I was the only employee that actually really worked still for Health Alliance. All the rest of the employees at the time worked for Woodland Pond. And I reported to the CFO up there, and everyone else was a Woodland Pond employee, but I was sitting here and they knew that I was reporting to the CFO and I was reporting things that were going on here. Obviously Christy and I and Sarah were getting along, but sort of some of the others weren't necessarily a fan, but it all worked out in the end. And here we are. All the way through, they were not for profit, though. Both organizations were not for profit. Yeah.
At some point, there was a lawsuit. Could you talk some about that, about having to do with the construction and how you felt having to go to court and represent Woodland Pond and can you talk some about that?
Well, since I had wanted to be a lawyer, I loved being involved in lawsuits. No, I mean, so we did ultimately at the end of the day, the original construction did go on longer than it was supposed to. It did. There were budget overruns. There were code compliance issues. So we did go into arbitration with the developer, and we did sue the architect and engineer. And in both of those situations, I was heavily involved in each of those. In each of those situations, we did not prevail at the end of the day. So it was a lot of time and money spent. The attorneys thought we had solid cases, but we did not prevail. So it was frustrating. It was just a lot of stress and strain on me because at the time I was trying to run Woodland Pond and we were not full. A lot of you, I'm not sure if you're aware of this. It took us almost 2.5 times as long as projected to fill because the housing market had contracted right when we opened. We opened in 2009. Obviously, that was not a good time to open. So here we are, you know, and we're trying to run the community and the building is not full. We actually didn't really reach stabilized occupancy until like 5 years. It was supposed to be like 1.5 years or 2 years in. So, you know, there were the financial components of that. So, you know, there's been a lot of history here. I know that a lot of you have moved in at a time when things feel like it's pretty stable and we're able to focus on things like what are we having in the dining room? You know, are we going to play ping pong today? You know, the rumor mill. And things were not like that though 10 years ago, 12 years ago. And there's been a lot to it. And to Dave's point, because of the challenges that we had with the original construction and development and the delays and the partners that we brought to the table, we're 2.5 years into the development project already. And although a lot of this feels like it's really coming on fast and new for all of you, we've done 2.5 years of due diligence to get to where we are now because of the issues that we had the first time around and how careful we want to be this time around and how we want to avoid those pitfalls. So we're trying to do this as carefully as possible. So to avoid as many of those problems if we can.
Michelle, first of all, thank you so much for this very open and candid conversation. I want to leap back to your comments and the feelings about 9/11, which obviously affected you. And it just brought back a flood of memories for me, which was a very poignant time because I was in Manhattan and 6 blocks away from the towers briefly until I was pushed away by the police. It just made me think that we all have different experiences, and it was so poignant. We need to perhaps find a way in our multitudinous different committees, focus groups, interest groups to find a way to capture that experience, which was seemingly long ago, but it's very immediate for you and for me.
Yeah, I mean, it is something I've thought about before because we all do have those memories. And I know for a very long time, and even to this day, and I've told my kids this, first of all, to me, it's really surprising. Every year when 9/11 comes along, I ask them, do they talk about it at school? And they kind of breeze over it. But I also know for me, because at the time when it happened, I lived with a roommate. Well, I lived with a couple of roommates at the time, obviously. I had a roommate that became completely paralyzed by the situation, and she would put the news coverage on TV and she couldn't turn it off. She would sit on the couch and she would just watch it endlessly. And I don't know if it's because of that, but I can't watch a minute of coverage about it. When it comes on the TV now, I can't look at it at all. I think everyone is affected by it differently. And I just don't know. And it's the same thing. You've all been through other things, right? And I think about this too. So when the Challenger exploded, right? I was in first grade and we'd all been in the cafeteria together, right? And they put the TV on in the cafeteria. We all got together to watch it and it explodes. And we're in first grade and we're all sitting in the cafeteria And then they just, all I remember is like, and I can picture it and I have chills right now thinking about it because we were little. They never talked to us about it. Parents didn't talk to us about it. I mean, at that time, the early 1980s, like there was no, they never did any kind of like trauma, that didn't exist, obviously. And you guys went through stuff in your lives too, obviously, when JFK got shot.
JFK got shot before he was born.
Right, for you, but
She's-
for me, but for you, right. You all have experiences like that. So I would be interested to see if residents would want to do some sort of a retrospective on 9/11, like in some way. Like, do we want to write our stories? Do we want to? Some may find that very triggering, some may want to do it. It certainly could be a voluntary thing, but everyone certainly has stories. And I think there were probably more than one person that was in Manhattan at the time when it happened. But then also, I mean, you have to think about this, just like I was not alive when JFK got shot. Many of our staff were not alive when 9/11 happened.
Correct.
But also, I mean, there's so many, traumatic events that people here have experienced. And it wasn't until I was talking with Dave that I have really spoken about even my experience, which was nothing compared to people that were in Manhattan. Yeah, but I mean, that's not a direct experience for myself.
Oh,
It's
that's
just,
pretty darn close.
you know, it's just, you don't, I don't know. There's so many things that we can do. And actually, I'll just take a moment to mention something to you while we're chatting. You're going to see in the Chanticleer tomorrow. We had a former board chair named Nadine Lemon who contacted me this week. She is the executive director of a not-for-profit in Kingston. And they received a grant for, I don't know what it is, but to make a long story short, they were linked up with a renowned documentarian who is a Guggenheim Fellow that is doing a memoir-based scrapbooking project that was going to be linking up with at-risk youths in Kingston, but they were not able to pull it together and they want to use Woodland Pond residents for the project. And we're going to need 20 residents that want to participate in the project. So you're going to see the write-up, her name, and she's been like published in the New York Times. She's done tons of documentaries. She basically wants to, and she's like 65 years old, but she's an artist. And again, she's a Guggenheim Fellow, a renowned artist. So she's got all the materials and the resources from the grants, but she's going to be here for 9 days in July. And for 20 residents that would like to participate, essentially, you're going to be putting together either life story or memoir with materials that you have that can be digitized to put scrapbooks together. It's a really fantastic opportunity. But I think it's to your point, there is so much history and memories that we have to try to figure out how to capture this so they don't get lost.
So can I ask a question on a little happier note?
Yes, please.
But there are a couple more hands. I think you can take a couple more questions. Let me just do this, Larry. I'll get you. Yeah, I know. We can go till dinner time. What are some of would you call your biggest achievements, or how do you have your most fun here? And you can take that either way.
At Woodland Pond?
Yeah, here.
Well, so first of all, obviously my kids, so Michael is 14 and he was born when I started. So I've been here, since that time. I think one of the things I like, first of all, I want you guys all to know there's not a day that happens, even during COVID, that I don't love coming to work. I never dread coming to work ever. I don't think of it like a job. And my children refer to it as a free-for-all, which I think is pretty awesome. It is a free-for-all. I mean, we have so much fun in the office. It's just, you have to think about what it would be like. Imagine your job, and then imagine what it would be like to sit in my office with Jason and the concierge and Lindsay and Jeffrey, and think about how fun that would be. Because even though it's a very high stress, I mean, it's a $30 million book of business. And what we're doing here, taking care of people's lives and finances and all the things we have to do. But these people and their personalities and what we're doing and what get to look out at the front desk, and just think about how fun that would be every day. Isn't that something you would envy as a 45-year-old?
Yes. Especially the 45-year-old part. Larry has a question.
Michelle, I've had a number of occasions to talk to you about things both professional, I guess, and personal. And one of the things that has struck me about you, and I wonder if you can explain how on earth you manage it. I've had some tragedies in my life, some rather recent, some not so recent. And you have always spoken to me, come to me to speak to me about it. And I would say that your compassion is personal. It's not professional. That is to say, you feel it yourself from your whole soul. And I just wonder how you manage to do that and hold yourself together.
So this is really interesting. And, you know, I feel very comfortable with all of you. So I'll be really honest with you. For a very long time and still part of me on the inside, I mean, growing up, my mother will tell you, and she'll probably still say it to this day, would tell you that I'm a pretty icy person. My sister will definitely tell you that, even though when she's here, you know, obviously we get along. You've seen her here when she's here. I don't think I'm actually icy. I think it's some kind of a combination of, like, I can compartmentalize, like a pragmatism. I will also tell you I'm the biggest crier around, but the tears come along with like pride and connection, right? So last night was Michael's 8th grade, well, not the 8th grade, but the whole like musical concert at Saugerties Junior Senior High. And like literally I was either actually crying or on the verge of crying throughout the entire concert because the talent and the effort that went into it was so great. And my next door neighbor is the choir director, and I could just see her passion and the kids' talent. And that kind of thing literally always makes me cry. And that's another thing. I'm surprised that in the jokes, the kids didn't say, like, is she up there crying right now because she's proud of somebody? And like, I'll see a clip on Sports Center or something, or I'll go to a Little League game for a kid that's not even my kid, and I'll be crying. So I don't think it's that I'm icy, but I can somehow compartmentalize it. And I can be empathetic because I can understand what somebody's going through. And I care about all of you deeply. But as we all know, being here, I think it's one of the greatest gifts that you can have because you're making connections with people so late in your life when you probably never expected to do that again. But then you lose people too, which of course you're doing it on a repeated basis, which becomes very hard. So it's just, I don't know, it's kind of a strange balance. But one of the things that I had to learn very early on, Larry, was where I had spent my whole life up until age 32, really not wanting to think about illness and death. I realized right away, like, you're not gonna be able to do that anymore, sister. Like, you're not gonna have that luxury. So you're gonna have to figure out how to navigate this piece of it now. You're going to have to make those phone calls. You're going to have to lean into it, and you're going to have to lead by example. Like, you're going to have to show the rest of the staff how to do this too. And I really had not experienced much loss up until that point in my life personally. So, you know, it's just, you kind of just have to figure it out kind of as you go.
Yes. One of my questions I think was already asked because I was going to ask you what is the best part of your job? What do you enjoy the most? But you've answered that. The second part of my question is, what can we do to help you do your job?
I think you already do it every day. I think that you're all, you know, such a rich part of my life, but also each other's lives. And I think just being really aware of each other's, where each other might be at that time. is helpful to me. You know, stepping outside of yourself for the moment. And I know that everybody really does that. And it really just gets back to the point of what I just said, which is that when you come into this community, you're coming into it not realizing the richness of the relationships that you're about to embark on. And sometimes you don't realize the relationships that you've made here until after the fact, until maybe after the person has passed away. And then in retrospect, you realize, wow, gosh, I didn't realize I'd gotten so close with that person, you know? And I know a lot of people don't realize when they move in, I'm about to, you know, make these relationships, you know, and it may not always be friends, but it's connections, and you do make the connections. And I think you can't hope necessarily right away, like, I'm going to make a million friends. It's not about necessarily making friends, but it's knowing that, you know, you have all these people around you that are familiar, people to say hi to. You know, it's nice to know, like, this is a familiar face that I now know, like these people from this committee or this person from the dining room. And imagine how different that is from the life that you had if you had just stayed in your home. You know, you would just like see people in the grocery store or see people, you know, it just, I think it's so cool, you know, and you may not get along with all the people, but it's just that many more people that you know and can say hi to and just get to know, and the staff, and just know that there's this many people here that may not like or love you, but they do care about you. And we do care about you too.
I think that wraps it up.
Well, Claudia, cool.
Okay, just hold a second and with the microphone. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to usurp your power. Time there. I'm sorry.
I'll keep it brief, but what brought us here rather than going to Peconic was when we were checking out our different CCRCs. We walked down the corridors there and there was no acknowledgement that we were existed even. We walked down the corridor here and it was, you know, just an acknowledgement that they didn't know why we were here, if we even lived here yet or what. But when we saw that friendliness, it really warmed us. And it's true. We've been here now 10 months and it's true. It's a very loving, kind community that we're so happy we're in.
Oh, good.
So,
Thanks for finally getting around to invite her. I told her.
I was hesitant that she would not have anything to say.
Well, you were wrong. You don't know me that well.
I took a chance.
That's right. Now, I do have another nickname, not just anyway, Karen. I'm surprised they didn't tell you the other one. The singing chef.
It's
Singing chef. Yes. Yeah, they might have had
What they were.
I'm right on the. Yeah.
Oh, I'm on the nine. Not middle, but. Yeah, beautiful. Thank you.